Most failures of management of change, or MOC, do not occur because people deliberately ignore the process. They occur because work needs to be done, time is limited, and decisions are made with good intentions under pressure. This video looks at how MOC goes wrong in practice and how those failures can be avoided. One of the most common reasons MOC fails is that people do not recognise that a change is taking place that impacts safety. This usually happens when the change is small, incremental, or feels like part of normal operations. Nothing obvious looks different, so the risk feels unchanged. At Tesoro Anacortes, operating practices had gradually moved beyond the original design assumptions of a heat exchanger. Those changes were not treated as a safety critical change. During startup, the exchanger ruptured, causing an explosion that killed 7 people. The plant itself had not obviously changed, but what people believed the equipment could safely tolerate had. A useful question that you can ask is, does this change alter how the system behaves or what we are relying on to stay safe? If it does, then it should be treated as an MOC. Temporary changes are often assumed to be lower risk because they're not intended to last. In reality, temporary and emergency changes are frequently made quickly, documented poorly, and communicated to only a small number of people. Over time, they can remain in place longer than intended and can quietly become accepted as normal. At Flixborough, a temporary bypass was installed to keep a chemical plant running while repairs were planned. That bypass failed, triggering a massive explosion that killed 28 people. The change was intended to be short-term, but it fundamentally altered how the system could fail. A useful question that you can ask is, who owns the temporary change and what clearly tells us that it's time to remove it? If there's no clear owner or endpoint, the risk is likely increasing rather than reducing. Management of change can become an administrative activity rather than a technical one. The paperwork may exist, but the essential conversations and challenge may not take place. The right people aren't engaged and assumptions aren't robustly challenged. At Montara, changes to well condition and barrier status were made during normal operations, and verification of those barriers was inadequate. The well blew out, leading to an uncontrolled hydrocarbon release that continued for over 70 days. Each individual decision appeared reasonable, but the combined effect was not fully understood. A useful question to ask is, if we had more time to think about this properly, what would we do differently? If the answer involves different people, better information, or a different assessment, the change may not be ready. Change is often associated with equipment or plant modifications. However, some of the most significant changes are organisational. Reduced supervision, fewer experienced personnel on shift, changes to who provides technical support, increased workload, stretched cover, or loss of independent challenge. Across many major incidents, the plant itself had not changed, but the organisation operating it had. Safety margins were eroded quietly, not by a single decision, but by a series of small organisational changes that were never treated as safety critical. Another common failure is treating MOC as complete once the physical work is finished. In reality, MOC should not be considered complete until the system, the documentation, and the people involved all reflect the same operating reality. This means all essential actions closed and all personnel informed and trained. The change has been truly embedded. A useful question to ask is, could someone unfamiliar with the plant understand this change from the documentation alone? For temporary changes, this also means truly confirming that the system has been returned to its original condition. If not, management of change is not complete. And the final question to consider is, are we closing this MOC because the change is properly embedded, or because we've become comfortable living with it? Change isn't about paperwork, it's about managing risk. It's about recognising change early and giving it the right level of attention, and not letting time pressure or constraints decide the risk for you. Small, temporary, and organisational changes are often the easiest to miss and some of the most dangerous. Not every change needs a long review, but every change that affects how hazards are controlled needs some challenge. If the process is rushed, avoided, or waved through, risk is being traded away. Time pressure usually increases risk, and that is when you must be at your most vigilant, when it comes to managing change. And MOC isn't finished when the work is done. It's finished when the documentation, the people and reality all match, and when temporary changes have been truly removed.